Warning: some contents may be disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
I went to this small-sized school that had K to 12 in a huge building that circled the statue. So, on one side of the statue, that was elementary school, and the other side is middle or high school. Middle school and high school had different bell systems, but we all shared the same teachers for certain classes. Gym was one of those classes, a mix of middle and high school kids, and I was a freshman at that time. We had a teacher who we called Mr. Fouts. He was a small, muscular guy, and I stood over him, and at first, he was a super chill dude. Everyone loved the guy, even the teachers did. I didn't really see the hype in that dude, but he was okay. I never got a creepy vibe with him. Well, it wasn't until we had to do some sprints or whatever, and I was pretty good at it. He had me come after class to discuss a few things with me. I did, and he wanted me to join the girls' cross-country team, said that I was exceptional and that they could use a runner like me. I told him that I wasn't interested in playing, even though I did like running, and he was okay with the fact that I was on the fence about it. He then told me how my speed would help get the team to some contest or whatever, and also said how nice I ran. I didn't think much of this, but I told him that I would consider it. Over the course of a few days, he started to talk to me more often, then stared at me, and we did more running activities than normal. Girls were always on him, and whenever he asked me to see him after class, there was at least 2 girls in his office. He never let me off joining cross-country, so I started to bug my parents. There was an event at my school which my parents would have an opportunity to meet him. I presented Mr. Fouts to my parents, and I didn't notice anything weird, but after they chatted, my stepdad pulled me to the side and said that I wasn't going to join cross-country and that I need to switch out of gym. I was mad and I was confused. I asked him why, and he said that until we get home, he would tell me. When we got home, he told me that he doesn't trust Mr. Fouts. He seemed like a predator, and the reason why was because as they were talking, he would turn to check out a few girls who were passing by. And then, he mentioned how nice I ran, my form, and the way my legs look as I ran. He said that I had the perfect body for a runner. I was in disbelief, and I told my dad to stick it where the sun don't shine. He was hysterical, and he told me to open my eyes and look closer. I did hate my dad at that moment for being overly protective and dismissing the fact that Mr. Fouts was just a well-liked guy. But after that, I did notice the little things. He would look at me up and down, and he always found a way to pull me out of class to talk to him about my parents. He started to call me Lolita, like the book, and then the final straw. He had me come in after class. I went to his office and it was just the 2 of us. I asked him what he wanted, and he had me sit down. He was disheveled looking, and the office was dim. He asked me again if my parents reconsidered. I told him no, and he chuckled. I was feeling uneasy and scared. He then got up and sat next to me, told me that I had a big opportunity in cross-country, and then proceeded to tell me how nice my legs were, how fit my body was, as he talked in a sexy, whispering voice. He put his hand on my shoulder, and it slowly moved down my back. I was shitting kittens at that point, and I told him as clear as day, "I'm not doing cross-country. I have other important things to do." And then I stood up and left. I was scared, and I was feeling gross. I went to my next class, and then I spent it going over in my head what had happened. I didn't think to go to the office or anything, because he had the whole school on his side. And I didn't tell my stepdad because I didn't want him to be right, and the fact that Mr. Fouts didn't do anything legally. So I just shut my mouth and I ignored that teacher for the rest of the first semester. We went back to how gym usually went, and the girls were still hanging out with Mr. Fouts. He then left to be a firefighter, and then he never returned. I still hear girls are friends with him on social media and stuff, but I guarantee that he screwed one of those girls. I'm just sure of it. He is one of the reasons why I stopped playing sports, which really sucks because I loved it. I now can't stand being called Lolita and people talking about my running. I think a lot of people would probably say that their freshman year of high school was pretty rough. And I'm sure a lot of those people are right and had valid reasons as well. I'm definitely not one to say that they were just being dramatic, because I too had a pretty bad freshman year. I didn't like talking about it for the longest time because I had some pretty bad self-esteem issues as is. But I have healed and I have become a lot nicer to myself since then. Also, I've come to understand that I also didn't deserve or warrant any of this, so I have no reason to blame myself. As my story goes, I was going to be a freshman at our local high school. New school, but it was the same school district, which meant that I would at least have friends there, so we could all be nervous and stressed together. I was a pretty normal kid growing up, or so I thought. I was the oldest of 4, so I was the first to go to high school. I wasn't outgoing, but I wasn't reclusive and shy either. I had a good amount of friends, and I did fine in school too. I always passed my classes with minimal issues. I hated math, but I still got through it. And I turned in a minimal amount of homework late. I didn't stand out in class or make myself known either. I was just there. But then things went a bit different in high school. Most of my classes were fine, except my chemistry class. Science was one of my favorite subjects, so I typically didn't have any issues. But chemistry seemed to be a bit more of a challenge for me. Not to mention, the teacher didn't help either. When I first started attending the class, I immediately got the feeling that Mr. Pendleton was going to be a hard ass. He was very curt in his speaking, he didn't really joke around, and was always on a very specific schedule. He would get upset very easily if someone interrupted him during a lecture, including slamming his hand down on his desk or the whiteboard. He would do this ear-piercing whistle to get people to pay attention. It was always just very intimidating. I always thought that it was weird, to the point that I thought that if kids bothered you so much, why even be a high school teacher? Anyways, I did my best in that class, but I admittedly struggled with locating the elements on the periodic table and also their symbols. I knew some of the common ones, but I struggled with the rest. I tried asking him for help, like if he had any suggestions on making it easier, but with a dead stare, he looked at me and said, "Just memorize it, it's not that hard." And I walked away from that conversation thinking that I was truly in the wrong. As if I was the only one that ever had issues with it, and that's how I took it. Over time, I did not get better in that class. I continued struggling with some of the topics, and Mr. Pendleton did nothing to make me feel better about it. When I got my assignments back, he didn't just mark things as wrong. He would put some mean comments next to them, making me again feel like there was something wrong with me. We had a monthly quiz that we took going over what we all learned that month, and when he was passing out the grade quizzes, he would hand it out to some saying things like, "Do better. Next time, you study." But never encouraging or optimistic words. And then he got to me. He flipped open my quiz and asked a question out loud, calling out a specific person to answer. He confirmed that it was correct, then pointed out my incorrect answer. He tossed my quiz at me and let the whole class know that I had the worst grade, singling me out. Everyone was staring at me, and I had never been more embarrassed. I felt incredibly stupid at that point, and I just put my head down, feeling the eyes burning into my head. And I remember going to the restroom and crying. My parents did ask me about school and weren't dismissive, but they also didn't think that the situation was that bad. I do blame myself for part of that, as I didn't really tell them how bad it was or how much I hated that class. I told them about how I didn't like the class, how the teacher was really unnecessarily mean, and how I seemed to be singled out. I showed them my assignments with his remarks. I told them about being embarrassed in class and how I seemed to be the only one affected by it. They agreed that he seemed pretty mean, but said that they would talk to the principal about it. I even spoke to my friends and others that were in his class, and they all agreed that he was a complete jerk, but didn't understand why I was being picked on so much. Except one friend that usually excelled in a lot of classes. He basically blamed me, saying that I just needed to study more and he was just trying to push me to do better. I wasn't friends with that person much longer either. So, while I waited and hoped that my parents would actually be able to make a difference, I tried to push through the harsh words and embarrassment and really work my ass off to at least pass the class. I had friends help and devoted a lot of time to get through it, but I did it. When we took our quarterly test, I passed it with a low B, and I was very proud of myself. Apparently, Mr. Pendleton was not impressed by this though, as he slammed my test on the table and he made sure to ask out loud, "Did you copy off your friend's test?" With a friend being the person that sat next to me. They looked at me funny too, and actually started sitting somewhere else. So yeah, that didn't make me feel better either. He said because he couldn't believe that I miraculously got better overnight. I was pretty upset, and quite frankly, I was fed up with being treated like this, so I defensively told him no, and that I studied more since he wasn't willing to help us. The room was silent and the tension was thick, but I felt pretty good for saying it. Mr. Pendleton, however, was not amused and told me to stay behind after class. I was not looking forward to that, and in fact, I tried to blend in with everyone and leave at the same time, but he definitely noticed. He called me out with his booming voice, halting me in my tracks. I waited by the door, and once everyone left, he told me to go over to his desk. He then asked me why I told the principal that I was bullying him. I replied that I didn't say anything to the principal, which was true, and he yelled at me saying that I was again lying. He said some other unpleasant things to me, but for some reason, I was just over all of it, and I yelled back at him that I told my parents that he was being a jerk and that he shouldn't be a teacher. He responded back by slamming me against the whiteboard, holding me by my shirt, and once again yelling some pretty hurtful things at me. I was honestly expecting him to try and hit me or strangle me. His face was red, and I could see the veins in his temple bulging out. I was terrified. Thankfully, Mrs. Stewart in the class attached to the right knocked and opened the door to see us in this position. I wish she wouldn't have knocked, because the knock was enough for him to let go of me. But judging by the look on her face, she knew something was wrong here. I was in tears and I walked towards her to leave. She asked me if I was okay and I said no. And Mr. Pendleton just sat back down at his desk. I went to the nurse and I asked her to call my parents as I had gotten sick, so she did. When my mom came to pick me up, I told her what happened and she immediately took me back to the school and to the office and she went to talk to someone about it, and I just remember sitting there worried that Mr. Pendleton was going to show up in the office. After that day, my mom would take me to school after the second hour, which was when I had his class, and I just collected my work for those first 2 classes. Mrs. Stewart also reported what she saw, so I guess having a witness was what gave the principal or whomever had that authority to suspend Mr. Pendleton. I was entirely relieved that he was gone, and I could tell that I wasn't the only one. The first couple of days without him were weird, but the sub definitely helped lighten the mood. By the end of it though, we were all able to be less formal and actually had a little fun in the class. I still had a hard time turning in tests and assignments, fearing that I was going to be made fun of or called out, and that anxiety bled over into my other classes as well. My freshman year was very difficult, and I struggled with my self-image as mentioned. It slowly got better over time, but I think that I really had Mrs. Stewart to thank for that. She helped me build my confidence again and really assured me that it wasn't me, but Mr. Pendleton. She actually confided in me saying that she had heard him shouting on many occasions and even at students from other and past classes, but she had never seen him put his hands on another student. I still wonder today if I was the only one, or if there were others that just were never caught or never said anything. Hell, I still don't understand why I was singled out so hard. I know that I wasn't the only one that wasn't doing well in the class, but I was the only one that seemed to be targeted, and I don't know why. He never returned to school, and I did much better after that. I just hope that he was never able to teach again, if that's how he treated students. I feel like this more so affected my mother instead of me, but being older now and also being a parent, I completely understand the fear and trauma it could have caused her. This took place in a small rural town in Virginia. I won't say more than that out of respect for my mother, but if not for her, I would blast the hell out of the sky here. Anyways, my parents lived here as a kid with their parents, and I do remember the town because I remembered visiting my grandparents there often. But when I was about 3 or 4, my parents moved out of there and into a larger, more populated city, saying that they wanted more options for me when it came to schooling and also friends, since the previous town was pretty secluded. And as for school, I had always done well until I started high school. I struggled in history and algebra. I don't understand why, because I normally loved math, but for some reason it was not clicking for me. The teacher was fine, but I can't say the same for history. They did nothing to help make anything interesting. He pretty just much made us read from this outdated textbook while he fell asleep at his desk. My parents saw the struggle the whole way because they had their own parent portal, and during one of the parent-teacher conferences, we all brainstormed some ideas. After some options were thrown around, we thought that it would be best to get a tutor to help. Apparently, I wasn't the only one struggling in history, and until the board made changes, some students created a study group. It was basically just a group of students working together, and they saw improvements in their grades, so they asked me to try it. I did like the idea though because It made me feel like I wasn't singled out. As for algebra, they did have tutor options through the school at no extra cost to my parents, so they suggested that I try that first. So for history, they basically just told me to show up on Tuesdays in the library and let someone know that I was there for the group study. And then, the algebra tutor was either a current or retired teacher volunteering. They try to stay consistent as to whom each student worked with to make it smoother, since everyone teaches differently. They told me that I would meet with the tutor at the school as well on Thursdays, so that following week, I went to the designated room and I was introduced to Mr. Michaels. My algebra teacher told me that he was a retired teacher, but that he loved to help students, so he still volunteered for this or even subbed a few classes before. I think I remember seeing him in passing before, but I don't recall ever seeing him in one of my classes as a sub. So, after a little talking between us and the teachers, we finally got into the work. It was Mr. Michaels, me, and about 3 or 4 other students. The first thing I remembered about him at that time was how patient he was and how much he actually seemed to listen to us. Granted that I had never been in trouble with school stuff before, so I was expecting to see some grumpy adult complaining about how they didn't understand what we didn't understand and that the work was easy and not actually help us. But instead, he broke down the equations and really focused on the parts that we struggled with to help us understand it better. And the more that I worked with him, the more confident I was feeling with my work and answers. After maybe just a few weekly sessions, I was starting to see improvements, and my parents were really proud of me for sticking with it as well. They asked me how I was feeling about it, and I explained everything to them. I even told them about the tutor and how he was a retired teacher, but that I had never seen him before. As the sessions continued, I found myself just talking to Mr. Michaels more. The sessions would typically be about 2 to 3 hours, but sometimes he would be escorted out of the school with security because we were staying so late. Sometimes there were other students that stayed behind with us, but usually it just ended with us in the room. So, whenever it came close to the end of the first semester, I wanted to do a pretty hefty review to make sure that I still understood everything, as well as fill out our little cheat sheet index card. We were all given one normal size index card that we could write whatever we wanted on it and then have it with us whenever we took our midterm exams. I remember it was getting close to closing when I made a comment about it being easier if we just did this outside of school, like a library or a cafe. Mr. Michaels didn't mind the idea either, so I went to use the phone in the room. Cell phones weren't really a thing that many kids had at this point in time. My mom answered, and I explained to her what I was wanting to do. I could tell by the tone in her voice that she didn't really like this, and at that time it confused me. She was reluctant but said that we could come home and then continue working in the living room or kitchen if we wanted to, but didn't want me to go anywhere else outside of the school. I was disappointed, but I told her that I understood, and then I hung up. I went and told Mr. Michaels about her response, and when I tried inviting him over, he then said that he actually had things that he needed to do as well, and then suggested that we just leave for the night and then continue the session next week, since we had one more week left before the exams. When I went home that night, I was still upset and explained to my mom as to why. All she really told me was that since it was school related, it was best to keep it at school. This was a weird statement to me because some of us from the history study group once met up at a local fast food place, and she was okay with it. Why was she treating this so different? And fortunately, or I guess fortunately, I didn't mention that there were occasions where it ended up just being me and Mr. Michaels, and I felt bad that they weren't even able to clean the room until we were gone, and that's why we wanted to go somewhere else. This immediately caused a switch to flip, and my mother became visibly upset. She said, "I thought there were other kids there with you. How often do you end up alone with him? Is there anyone that ever goes in and checks on you at all?" I could tell that she was holding something back and not telling me, but since she was the parent, I wasn't going to push the matter. I just answered her questions honestly and watched as she became more and more visibly upset. She told me that I was not to meet with any adult alone ever again, and told me that I needed to tell her or my dad immediately if it ever did happen. This obviously upset me as well. I was doing so much better, and I was so proud of the improvements that I had been making, but my mom couldn't seem to see that and was instead getting upset about something that she suggested that I do in the first place. I went to bed that night pretty mad and confused, and hardly said anything to my parents before I left for school the next morning. Since I didn't see Mr. Michaels until the following week, I was in my normal happier mood at school and at home. That next Thursday, though, all the emotions would come racing back when my mom surprised me with an early pickup from the tutor session. I would typically call her when I was done, and then she would come and pick me up as I waited outside. Mr. Michaels was pretty quick to leave after that, so he was never around by the time she got there. This time, she came into the school, and when she opened the door and made eye contact with all of us, all the color drained from her face. She told me that we needed to leave now and told me to pack up my stuff quickly. I was confused. She had never done this before, and this time we weren't alone. It was me and Mr. Michaels, as well as another girl and a guy. Mr. Michaels stood up and just in a cold, non-personal tone said, "See you later," and then turned his attention to the other two. He had been sitting by me at that time, so he had gotten up and walked closer to the others, and I didn't understand any of this. When we got to the car, my mom took off quicker than I had ever seen her drive, and the first thing she said to me with a shaky voice was, "You are to never meet with Mr. Michaels again, do you understand me? Not alone, not with a group of people, never. If you see him coming towards you, you walk in the opposite direction. Do you understand me?" I didn't understand what was going on. I kept asking her what was wrong and to explain to me because she was scaring me, but I was also frustrated. Why was she doing this? Again, as her voice cracked, I could tell that she was holding back tears as she said that there are some things that you just don't need to know until you're older. I didn't even get the chance to really try and make any sense of this, nor would I even be in a situation where I would possibly run into him again. My parents kept me out of school for the rest of the week and the next. Taking those exams were a pain, but at least I got it done. There were several meetings that my parents had with teachers and also the staff, but I was always left at home with my grandparents. At least, we had the holiday break, so I didn't miss much school after that. But when I went back, I felt like I had so many eyes on me. Thankfully, my mom was already at the door waiting for me at the end of the day because I didn't even like riding the bus anymore. After the school year was finished though, we would move again and out even further from their hometown and the town where I had grown up in. It wasn't until I was older that I finally understood everything clearly. Mr. Michaels wasn't his real name, but was just the name he went by at that school. I don't know if maybe he used his middle name or what. However, he was a teacher at my mom's old high school from the first town. He was the type that tried to fit in with the kids and be cool and succeeded at that. He got a lot of kids to like him, including my mom. Unfortunately, his intentions were a little more sinister. Over a period of a few months, he assaulted my mother, taking advantage of her when they were alone. It started when he gave her rides home and was even brazen enough to try stuff at the school, all while trying to convince my mom that it was for her own good so that she would pass. My mom ended up dropping out of high school because of this. Sadly, her parents didn't believe her at first until she talked to some other girls that confessed to being a victim as well. I'm not sure of all the legal details, but basically, he was never actually charged with anything because no one had evidence, and then he fled. He was nowhere to be found, like he just fell off the face of the earth, and of course, no one cared. After my mom met my dad and had me, they wanted to move away due to all the bad memories of that town. They settled into a place, and that's where I grew up and began going to school. I'm sure her experience was always in the back of her mind, but she always went to the conferences and met any and all teachers and staff to make sure that she was involved. Unfortunately, she never met the tutor because there never really was an opportunity to do so. Not to mention, everything else at the school so far had been fine. I don't think anyone really expected this same creep to show up years later in a town and school several hours away using a different name. So of course, it was quite the shock to my mom when she saw him in the room with me. Sadly, I assumed that he recognized my mom too, because even with all the meetings and complaints that she had with the school board, he was long gone again. No one saw him again, and apparently, the contact information that they had for him didn't work anymore either. I didn't know if he had any sinister plans with me or any of the other kids, but it just makes me sick these days knowing I was in the same room as him and alone at that. Not to mention, now he's gone again and he could literally go anywhere. I don't think it would be fair to call me paranoid either when I say it's never a bad idea to be suspicious of anyone, especially adults that are around children or other vulnerable people. And most importantly, not only do I hope I never see him again, but I hope that he never sees another child.
And here's the riddle for this video.
Hey everyone, this is your creepy sister. Thank you so much for watching the video. I do hope you enjoyed it. Also, don't forget to leave a like and a comment. It really helps the channel out. A big shout out to both my channel members and Patreon members. Thank you so much for taking your support to the next level. You guys are great. And again, to everyone, stay scared because your fear feeds me.